Streaming at the confluence of two great rivers. This is WHEI, St. Paul.
And now, a program that digs deep into the subterranean world that lives and breathes beneath the streets of St. Paul. This is Under the Brick, with host, tour operator Cynthia Schreiner Smith, and geologist and author Dr. Greg Brick.
Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Under the Brick. I'm your host, Cynthia Smith. I am owner-operator of Sin City Tours in St. Paul. But this show is about our friend, Dr. Greg Brick, author of the book Subterranean Twin Cities and many other great books I highly recommend. And we interview him because he is a geologist, he is an extraordinary urban explorer, and an expert on everything under the bricks of St. Paul. Welcome, Dr. Brick.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, today we are talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is Fountain Cave in St. Paul. And Fountain Cave, can you tell us where it's located right now today?
The cave still exists. It's under approximately where Shepherd Road and Randolph come together. Not exactly, but back in the day it was known as the Upper Cave because it was a few miles above the city of St. Paul.
So it's still there, but we can't get in it anymore because the DOT paved over it, I believe it was 1960?
That's correct. When they built Shepherd Road, they wanted as they call it, a quick route from the international airport to downtown St. Paul. And this enormous ravine where the entrance of Fountain Cave was located happened to be just this attractive spot to throw all the dirt, the excess dirt they had. And so they filled it up.
Okay, so yeah, those of us in the tour business or loving to watch public television, we hear the stuff about lost Twin Cities, the buildings that were lost above ground, but I feel like Fountain Cave is a beautiful lost part of St. Paul that we unfortunately no longer have access to because I believe for a long time it was a very large tourist attraction in the young city of St. Paul.
Yeah, back during the steamboat era, the 1800s, it was listed as one of the attractions on what they called the Grand Rounds. And nowadays, if you come in through the international airport, you'll get a list of things like the Mall of America, and there's no natural features on there. But this was something you had to see back in the 1800s, and many people, and well-known people, used it as a picnic location.
Okay, yeah, I know. I read, and you also published a pamphlet. It's, I believe, about a 12-page pamphlet on Fountain Cave, which is fascinating, full of these old stereoscopic photos and maps of Fountain Cave. It was discovered, I think you said in your book, in 1817. Major Stephen Long, who described it as this beautiful cave. Can you describe it for us, what it used to look like when it was a tourist attraction?
Yeah, and this is presents an interesting contrast to Carver's Cave, which we've already discussed, because Carver's Cave was this short cave that had a lake in it, which Carver aptly describes, whereas Fountain Cave was this enormously long cave, by contrast, that had a stream coming out of it. And so you would go out, you would stop at the river, along the river banks, Mississippi River, and walk up through this immense vertical walled ravine, several hundred feet, until you came to this immense Gothic arch, 16 feet high. And then you'd feel this blast of cold air on a hot summer's day in the stream at your feet. And you'd be in a huge room made out of sandstone, and the natural sandstone bedrock. And it would narrow down quickly to a small passage. You would follow that dark passage, And then you'd come to another room, not quite as large as the first one. And then that one would narrow down, and then you'd come to a third room. And I know this sounds like Alice in Wonderland kind of stuff. So you keep doing this. You get to the fourth room. And then beyond it, you'd hear, as the passages are getting to its smallest dimensions, you'd hear in the distance what sounded like a little waterfall. But no one ever made it to that waterfall. And I don't think it was a huge one. I think it was just water descending a few feet, maybe back in there.
But that's where it got its name, Fountain Cave, because of this waterfall that was buried deep in the back?
Yeah, just water coming out generally. I think they described Stephen Long, who discovered this. He described the getting a good cold drink as at a water fountain. So it's just the idea of good fresh water where you could refresh yourself.
You talked about it being like Alice in Wonderland with the chamber after chamber, and I've heard some descriptions say 50 feet across and some smaller. But either way, I think one of the issues back then, people would want to go explore this cave, and they didn't have electric flashlights. They had torches and stuff like that. And if you got way in the back and maybe dropped your candle or whatever, you were in trouble, weren't you?
Yeah, there's several accounts in the travel literature of visitors doing exactly that. You get like 1,000 feet back in the cave, because this is a very long cave compared with Carver's Cave, which is only a few hundred, just over 100 feet long. This is like more than 10 times larger. And they would drop their torch or candle, and boop, now you're in total darkness. Fortunately, that's really no problem from my own perspective, from being in a situation, because there's only one way to go. You just turn around and follow the direction of the flowing water. But to someone who that's their first cave experience, it's doubtless quite terrifying.
I think I've read some stories that some people did get lost in those caves and maybe didn't make it back out, and that might be the source of some of the rumors of it being a haunted cave.
Yeah, this is fascinating because Fountain Cave is actually the earliest Euro-American ghost story for the Twin Cities. There are Native American ghost stories which long predate it. But for Fountain Cave, at least, that it was described that in the early days of the settlers, the children come running home and after playing in the cave and describe that they had seen specters, as they called them, floating through the various rooms of the cave. And of course, then they vacated the premises, so to speak. It's the earliest ghost stories we have.
One of my favorite things in your, and I wish I had marked the page, one of my favorite things in your little pamphlet here on Fountain Cave is you quote a gentleman named Peter Garrioch, I think that's how you pronounce it, who went in there talking about getting lost with the hobgoblins and specters and other tender creatures of the night. I think his imagination went a little wild when he was stuck in that cave. So another person that is associated with Fountain Cave is a rascally guy named Pierre Perrant.
Ah, yes.
Better known as Pig's Eye.
Yep.
And so we know that Pig's Eye, he's pretty famous, as originally the name of St. Paul was Pig's Eye's Landing. And he was living in Fort Snelling. And at one point he set up a little bar just outside Fountain Cave.
This story, as you've just retold it, is we have a courtesy of St. Paul historian Fletcher. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of parts of his history that are kind of tongue in cheek. So we don't know how much is just him having a joke, and how much is actually serious history. But according to that, and he began this saloon, as they want to call it, in 1838 in this natural cave. It would be a natural place for one because it was very cold in there in the 40 degree because of the cold groundwater. And as the story goes, the whole rationale was that it was right at the edge of the Fort Snelling military reservation, so he could sell booze to the soldiers who would have to actually, come out to where he was, and then kind of thumb his nose at the authorities because he was just off the property and they couldn't do any, just over the fence.
But then I think the commandant expanded the borders of the property in an effort to get him out of there, which he did. And then Perrant, I have found some evidence saying that maybe he started a saloon over on what is now Robert and Kellogg. So I don't know, something we're going to have to dig into, Greg, I think, for another time. So let's get back to Fountain Cave itself, though. It was a tourist attraction, and we talked about it being paved over by the DOT in 1960, but really the touristy part of it ended a lot earlier than that. You mentioned in your book that in 1880, the Omaha Railroad built a roundhouse right over the cave.
Yep.
And you're probably thinking, well, it's over the cave. What's the problem? But they did something very unusual, didn't they?
Yeah. So the Omaha Railroad had that roundhouse there up until the 1940s and beyond. You can still find traces of it on the ground if you look for it. And so the Fountain Cave, the golden age for for tourists was from about 1850 to 1880 when the roundhouse and shops were built there. But of course, railroads are just, they're very mercenary. They're just, everything is run on, a cash basis, and they don't give a hoot about scenic attractions unless they're in control of them and they can sell it and so on. So what happened was, as they were digging they were put in the roundhouse and shops, they needed a place to drain all the vile fluids that would be produced. Like, just like when you go for an oil change with your car, where does that oil go? It hopefully goes to environmentally friendly. Well, there's no such thing back then. They got to drain out these locomotives, all kinds of nasty stuff, oils, grease, and so on. They just poked a hole into the ground. And what better? They knew about the cave. It was quite prominent. It's right on the riverbanks where the roundhouse was. And so they just lined it up and drilled down to the cave. And that's where you can see the little note on the old maps. They drained all those fluids down into the cave. And at that point, nobody wanted to visit it anymore. It was not an attractive place to explore after that.
Yeah, that breaks my heart, this beautiful natural resource that St. Paul had, and it basically got turned into a sewer. And that ended that. And I know that people are very aware that there's many, many sandstone caves up and down the river in St. Paul today, but this was really the only natural one, besides Carver Cave, correct?
That's correct. In St. Paul, Minneapolis, there's some other natural caves, but for St. Paul, yeah, you had two choices. You had the cave above town and the cave below town, according to the way the river flowed.
Okay, so here's the question that I think a lot of people listening want to know. Have you ever personally explored Fountain Cave? Have you been in there? Even though it is closed shut, have you been in it?
No, that was when I began urban exploration in the late 80s. That was my first big project. And that was the one about which I wrote my first big monograph, as I call it, for Ramsey County Historical Society, which requested a history of the real Fountain Cave. And if you look at my starting point was the that the Minnesota Historical Society had put a bronze plaque on the bluffs above describing had been the location of the Pig's Eye Parent Saloon in 1838, and said that the water trickling out of the ravine, there would have been a ravine here in front of you, which is now filled up, as we pointed out, and that would that was the end of that. And so I started looking for that water, because water, by its nature, coming from a geological background, water doesn't vanish. It's always going to find a way. And so I started looking for that water. And sure enough, I found a concrete pipe at the base of the riverbanks where water was pouring out. And I thought, aha, I found Fountain Cave. So I went back, got flashlights and helmets and everything, and began crawling up this concrete pipe with the full expectation that I'd be entering Fountain Cave within a very short period of time. And I heard all the cars on Shepherd Road go thump, thump on the manhole lids above me. It opened up. Finally, the concrete, after crawling 400 feet, the concrete pipe opened up into a huge sandstone space under the West 7th Street area, about where Fountain Cave was. I thought, aha, I'm a genius, and so forth. And so I followed it out, and I knew enough about Fountain Cave to realize this does not look like the Fountain Cave of the description. There's supposed to be 4 rooms in a row. I knew what it looked like from the old stereopticon view. It looked nothing like that. It was just a straight-walled sewer with a brick invert. None of these 4 rooms. I couldn't hear any waterfall back there. So I was back to square one. But that was the beginning of my search for Fountain Cave, which went on. I wasn't done yet, but that was like on day one.
And to this day, have you ever found it?
No. Everything we're talking about I described in my book and my booklet. And many, many other people have tried after me, and I have found over the years their elaborate diggings. Someone put their heart and soul into some of these sandstone excavations underground, but none of them actually connect with the cave. The sewer runs parallel to the cave, but doesn't connect with it. So if someone were to break into the cave at some point, it would be dry because the water source up on the surface was diverted when they built the Ford plant in Highland Park, because they had to have a railroad track connecting with the Ford plant. So the sinkhole that had all this water, collected all this water for the cave, they plugged it.
Okay. All right, so then it is a mystery living under Shepherd Road somewhere. There is a marker, I understand, that they put up in 1963. I don't know if that's one you were referring to.
Yes.
So, and people can go and look at the marker and know that Fountain Cave is somewhere near there. Warning, there's really no place to park. So you're running down busy, near Shepherd Road, but take that into account. But there is a plaque. And we can at least keep Fountain Cave alive in our memories and through your wonderful books. I think that's going to wrap it up for us for Fountain Cave today. And I'm so excited for our next episode, where we are going to talk about something I think a lot of people have not heard of under St. Paul, and that is the urban Nile. So come back next time, and thank you so much once again, Greg. We'll talk to you next time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Under the Brick, featuring the subterranean adventures of local geologist and explorer Greg Brick. Your host has been tour operator Cynthia Schreiner Smith. Tune in again next time